What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for Your Overwatch. Already, Echo's getting a massive nerf on the PTR, and I can't stress enough how big this nerf is. It completely changes my opinion on the character, and I will explain that more as we get through the video. But first, background gameplay for today's video is featuring Samito, who's a beast streamer and recently did make a tips and guide video on Echo that you can find linked in the description. Now, getting into the news, PTR got updated last night with 2 direct nerfs to Echo. The first nerf was in the bug section, where now she no longer can target enemies with duplicate through barriers, which is really important. She'll have to get vertical against those tanks, which still isn't too hard. But the huge nerf was to her mobility. Your flight speed will now return to regular movement speed if canceled during the initial speed burst. That's the complicated one, but they also added an option for hold for flight within Echo's hero options. Bit of a quality of life change there. But if you don't know, Echo's movement was incredibly, hilariously overpowered. Here's a clip of Libero using both a speed boost and the flight animation cancel, which is no longer in the game, to 2-hop across the entire map of Nepal so fast that he gets to the choke before the enemy team does, killing them in the back. No character could move like that. Lucio rollouts eat your heart out. A lot of players were really learning how to use this. It's now defunct. It's removed. So when you use her flight now, it'll only get you the momentum to the distance it probably was supposed to send you, and it's a much shorter burst of movement. The way I'd explain the way the old movement worked was like if Farah's jump jet also gave you the horizontal speed that Concussion Blast does. If you're not a Pharah player, I'll quickly explain, but you can use both those cooldowns together to go up at an angle, or that's the only way you really get horizontal distance control, not just vertical. But Echo could do all of that in one cooldown. This is important because movement is core to this character being good. If I had to put a numerical value on it, I'd say the character is 30% less strong in this new form because not being able to abuse outrageous movement tech, now she really has to play a lot smarter, can't bail herself out of situations as easily, and the opportunities you can gain for yourself are far more limited now because that movement really unlocked to make the rest of her kit much easier to use. If you can be anywhere at any time, moving at the speed of Doomfist with the flight speed of like Mercy Valk, you can get the best duplicate target, you can get the best angle for sticky bombs, and have a great selection of the targets that you want to go dive bomb. But now all of that is changed. And because of that, my opinion on Echo has changed. I think in this state, she's likely balanced, if not kind of average. I'll expand more on that point, but first, a few more news items. Also shared on Reddit was a interesting aspect of the new target confirmation ability, which adds an advantage we didn't think about. Now, since it pre-selects the target, although it does require that extra button press, because it selects it beforehand, you actually can then break line of sight in order to cast Nano Boost. And you'd assume Duplicate works the same way. This has some big benefits because that means when your Genji is flying in the sky, you can have him targeted ahead of time and not be out in line of sight in danger of getting sniped. So despite the slowdown on Nano Boost, it might be worth it twofold due to avoiding accidental boostios as well as being able to cast it from safety. Next up in the news, GameSpot had an interview with Jeff Goodman speaking about Echo, and he goes into detail on the process of developing the character, stating that they had the design for the character since Overwatch many, many years ago. I mean, they always knew Echo or Athena was a thing, but they only really started to work on the character design for gameplay concerns when she appeared in McCree's reunion cinematic. The article and quotes from Jeff Goodman describe that sometimes a new hero design is looking to attack a gameplay need, like if they need a sniper or an answer to the meta, which has had mixed results in the past, let's be fair. They might make a character to shift the game in that direction, but with Echo, Jeff Goodman says it was more that we had the art for her a long time ago, and they sort of shaped the gameplay development as it went along. But the duplication ability was a key part to Echo's identity, since of course she is an advanced AI machine learning. You can see how they wanted that gameplay to emulate the lore of it. But here was kind of interesting. Jeff Goodman says the original idea was to keep her support, and then you'd be able to do this full clone ability that she has now. But then pretty quickly we realized that the ultimate is really cool, but it's not really going to work as a support because I don't think you really want your healer to suddenly become a tank or a DPS. And now you don't have a healer. Whereas somebody in the DPS role is much more flexible. Now you have a tank and a healer, so it feels like if we're going to do that kind of thing with swapping roles, you probably should start in the damage category. So that's when we started going down the damage route and develop the rest of her kit to support that. So I find this incredibly interesting, and perhaps this is another conversation that can go more in depth another time, but Overwatch really struggles to implement kit that in other games, especially MOBA games, can fit into the support category or in the tank archetype, but due to the expectations of Overwatch gameplay, they've never really dipped their toes in what I'm going to describe as an offensive support. So what do I mean by that? Well, duplication abilities or focusing down a target that is at low health, these are very MOBA-esque things that come attached to characters, and forgive me if you don't play Dota, but it's the only MOBA that I played extensively to have a reference point to. Rubik, for example, his ultimate ability copies or steals a spell right after your enemy casts it. So there's some interplay where if your enemy casts their ultimate, you can steal that and reuse it against them. Very similar to Duplicate, and in fact, this ability was core to what's known as the play in Dota, the biggest play that's ever been executed in the history of the game, or at least the most famous one, and it has this awesome swing back potential. But Rubik's a support character, right? And the thing is, in Overwatch, there is no such thing as an offensive support, which I think is a major problem to the design of the game, and something that at some point the design space is just going to feel too limited, because if they feel they have to put every single offensive type support kit, whether it be Sombra Hack, May Freeze and Wall, Echo, before we had 222, a character like Brig replaced the DPS, if all of these characters get pushed towards being DPS, well, we are going to keep this lopsided roster problem forever. But you can see where they're coming from, because releasing a single hero into the support category that doesn't heal would be terrible for the overall gameplay experience. But the trade-offs between healing and having these outrageous cooldowns that set up team fights or just flat out disable characters and things like that, the power of that being in a support at the trade-off of healing is one of the bigger balance points to these other games, which is something that Overwatch doesn't really have. So I understand Jeff Goodman's stance, and he's probably right, that Overwatch players would be very, very upset if the support category had a hero in it that didn't heal directly. But at the same time, this is the way that other games keep their damage-focused characters to be about the DPS rather than the disables and the cooldowns. And Overwatch might not ever solve the problem of getting more characters into tank and support if they don't acknowledge that they need some of those tools at the expense of normal tanking or healing. But I admit, just adding one hero that does those things might be awkward, and even adding multiple at once might be bad too, because then you could get a situation where both your supports play non-healers and everyone hates playing the game. But I would also say Overwatch could use more tanks that are self-sufficient like Roadhog, and we already have a bunch of DPS that are quite self-sufficient like Soldier 76, for example, or Tracer. So an interesting thought. I'll let you guys chew on that, and maybe we'll discuss that in a future video. I know a lot of Overwatch fans come from a World of Warcraft background, and as far as I know, supports there just straight up heal. But in Diablo or a lot of MOBA games, supports are about more than healing, and I wish Overwatch could do that too, though I'll admit it would make the game much more complicated, yet at the same time would open up the design space and have the potential to be more interesting, but only time will tell on that. Now here at the end of the video, I wanted to talk about Echo and her balance state. With the big movement nerf, I see this new version of Echo as like a third worse than she used to be. Not being able to freely fly across the battlefield limits where she can play, limits her ability to escape, limits the positions she can get to. It just makes her entire kit worse. And whereas the previous version I felt had the potential punching power of Doomfist while being able to play at a safe range like Pharah and having an incredible ultimate like Genji all rolled into one, now I think she's in a bit more of a reasonable state, somewhere in between the power of Genji and Doomfist. I think she's probably a bit better than Genji in this state, simply because this Echo, sure, has some mid-fight pick-off capabilities, but she's very fragile in the mid-fight. It's really Duplicate that you're trying to play for with Echo that's going to be the core of the character, similar to the way Genji is. Both of them have the potential to get mid-fight pickoffs and outplay their opponent, but it's somewhat difficult to execute. Both of them can assassinate low HP targets, but that sort of requires you to make quite a big play in the mid-fight or the enemy to make a mistake. I do think that players are going to be quite frustrated playing up against Focusing Beam, where if you take any little bit of damage from anything, an Echo flies in on you with a beam, you're just not getting saved. But there also is so many ways of insta-dying in Overwatch anyway that that's not necessarily something other characters can't do, because there's other DPS that can one-shot you as is. So it really comes down to Duplicate to carry Echo's potential, and that is quite high, basically because Echo breaks the confines of 2-2-2. For a moment in gameplay, you're not just allowed to trade your DPS for a tank or support. You get exactly the one you want with an extra life and functionally 1, 2, 3 ultimates of that character. So all those things rolled into one, I think Duplicate might be the best DPS ultimate, because it means you don't have to play a DPS for 15 seconds. Like, do we remember the GOATS era? Whenever the top meta was allowed not to pick a DPS, you would always trade in to get a tank or a pseudo tank / heal character like Brig, and getting one that allows you to go super aggro into the enemy team just sets up for all sorts of plays from those characters that normally would never happen. Normally, an enemy Roadhog can't jump into your entire team and whole hog you. It's pretty difficult to set up whole hog because he doesn't have mobility, but Echo's Duplicate ability allows Reinhardt, Hog, whoever to flank and dive bomb into you with an extra life. How many Rein players would love a button that just gives them an extra life? Go for some bad aggro and just be able to have a get out of jail free card. That's an outrageous strength, right? And the truth is, Duplicate won't always yield huge payoffs, but I see it as sort of a value sink. When an enemy Echo dives into your team, duplicating a medium to high value target, you absolutely have to get a disable on it. And this might be an Ashe and Bob type scenario where mid-fight disables like Hack or on a sleep dart are enough. We might find that it feels easy enough to shut down dive bombing Duplicate plays once everyone gets used to it with a single cooldown. But my concern is what happens when that Echo gets pocketed by Zarya bubbles or her team works around her. Nano Boost feels pretty good on Echo for this, which is why I think it's very analogous to how Genji Blade works, but just potentially better. But Samito said something to me that I think is a good way to describe Echo's power level outside of super jump being a thing. The way Samito worded it was, the wacky state she looks like she's in on PTR is essentially what it takes for an Overwatch character to be any good at all. Which is an interesting thought to have, right? Because she's competing up against Hanzo, Doomfist, Widowmaker. At the highest tiers right now, McCree is dominating things, and because of that, all the trapeze artists jumping around the map might not matter when McCree is just dinking you through the sky or bursting down your tanks or stunning you when you go into Duplicate, perhaps even just canceling whatever ult you build up while dive bombing the team, and that direct value might just be more than what Echo can bring. And without OP movement, I tend to agree. Her kit as is will fit her among the medium power level characters, but she's not going to break the game. And in fact, she may be one of the nuttiest counterpick characters in ways that we have yet to dream about. Because when you pick Echo, there's certain picks that the enemy might just never want to have, like Doomfist or Tracer, and perhaps Reinhardt and Hog, who just simply do too much when they can instantly teleport into your team with an extra life, all the cooldowns attached, and ult building in 2 seconds. But when everybody learns how to counter that, it might be sort of a Genji Blade type situation where, yeah, it can kill the whole team, sure, until we all learn how to counter it and make sure we don't let that happen to us. So that's my thoughts on that huge news roundup today. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out, lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.